أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Today we're going to be talking about the last and the fourth pillar of nobility, and that pillar is al-adl, or justice. Last time we talked about justice or al-adl, but today, inshallah, we're going to wrap it up, and finish it up, inshallah, to go on to a new subject. Last time we said one of the greatest pillars of nobility is to have something called adl, or justice. And today we're living in a world that's full of extremism. And for a person to be moderate, that would be one of the greatest gifts you could have. And we said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised the Muslim ummah in Surah al-Baqarah in the middle of the surah by saying, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. Here you guys might ask, well, what does being moderate have to do with being just? Actually, in the Arabic language, justice, or in Arabic it's called adl. Actually, in the Arabic language, the word adl, it denotes putting things in their rightful place. So for this reason, when you're moderate and you're not going to extremes, that means that you put the thing in the right place. So subhanallah, extremism, it would never be in the right place. Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say that they had something called ghulu, or extremism? So when you have ghulu or extremism, that means you didn't put the thing in the right place. But subhanallah, the Muslim ummah, Allah wanted them to be witnesses for all of the nations before and to come, that they are the moderate nation. Here, I just want to say something, because a lot of people, when they hear something called moderate and not going to extremes, sometimes they try to define being moderate in their own way. Like many times they'll be like, well, wearing hijab or the jilbab and the khimar, that's going to extremes. Not shaking hands with that person is going to extremes. No, we do not want people's different definition of extremism. We want the Sharia's definition of extremism. You get what I'm saying? Because there are a lot of people, like, if, for instance, if you lower the gaze, they'll be like, oh, you're too extreme, No, following your religion, that's not called extremism. That's called being on the sirat al-mustaqim. And when you do follow your religion, then you are being moderate. Okay. So I just wanted to point that out, because a lot of people think that being moderate means to be modern and to, like, you don't go into depth into your religion. No, being moderate means to follow your religion, because Islam is in itself a moderate religion, and it doesn't go to any kind of extremes. So that's what being moderate has to do with justice, or adl, because it's putting things in their right place. And of course, it also means, if we're talking about court, we're talking about giving other people their equal treatment. So we don't want to be impartial in our behavior with people. But a lot of people think actually that adl only has to do with the court and giving people their rights and equal treatment. No, it really, literally, it means putting everything in their right place. And we talked about how in nature, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us ayahs and shows us in many things in nature, for example, in water or with the air, how everything, when it's moderate, people benefit from it. But when they go to extremes, even the vital things in life, like water, if we go to extremes in it, what happens? It can cause death. So subhanallah, the extreme excess of water or the extreme lack of water, they both, subhanallah, are going to be, against humanity, and they're going to cause a lot of destruction. So for this reason, we want to follow the middle path in everything that we do. And we talked about moderation in worship, and how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he would offer his salah, he would be moderate. He was moderate in his sermon. It wasn't too lengthy. It wasn't too short. We also talked about being moderate in spending, and we differentiated between tabdhir and israf. And we said that israf is in things that Allah made halal, while as tabdhir is spending money in things that are what? In haram. And in this case, we want to make sure that we are always muqtasideen. We're moderate in our spending. We don't go to the extreme left, which is israf, or to the extreme right in terms of being stingy. So subhanallah, Islam taught us to be also, moderate in our in our spending. And that doesn't have anything to do with being poor or being rich. In the end, you have to be moderate even if you've got money. Okay? Also, we talked about how Islam teaches us to be moderate in our speech, how to be moderate in our walking. And we agreed that it's not just the ethics of talking and walking. It's not just that the instruction is just talking about ethics, how you speak and how you walk. No, it extends beyond that, because it's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that character is revealed through action. So the way you walk and the way you speak, it reflects your inner character. So your walk and your talk, it's like expressing or being a mirror to what you are inside, subhanallah. So we talked about that and how we have to have a balance in these things. We also, because we talked about how to walk and how Islam taught us how to walk, we took a small glimpse of how, subhanallah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who his whole life was a reflection of the Quran. He was a Quran walking on the face of this earth. And we just gave an example, for instance, how the Prophet, subhanallah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how he used to walk. And you can notice how he was so moderate. I mean, true, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was walking with humility and he was walking with modesty, but at the same time, he was walking with dignity and purpose. Subhanallah. So look at how he was moderate. He was able at the same time to be humble and modest, but at the same time to be dignified and have a purpose in his in his walking. And at the same time, true, he would have his head, down while he was walking, but it wasn't out of shame. It was out of humility. And what proves that is that the Prophet ﷺ, he was always aware of his surroundings. He would be passing by people. He would be aware that these people were around him, and he would say, Salamu alaikum. So for this reason, subhanallah, he was just, subhanallah, so moderate in the way that he walked. He had everything, all the characteristics that you would want in a dignified, humble, modest walk, subhanallah. And at the same time, he would pay attention to his health. He would be walking in a way that would be beneficial for the body. So in order for a person to be able to be well-rounded, I mean, subhanallah, being moderate in your life, it gives you everything. It makes you a well-rounded person. It makes you a person with, subhanallah, like a personality that's well-rounded. You have everything. But always people that go to extremes, they're going to lose a lot of things, subhanallah. So even the walking of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was so beautiful. Today, when we're talking about extremism, I mean, we're struggling with this, with moderation today. We are. Today in this modern world, we talked about how everybody who wants to follow the path of Islam, to be moderate, subhanallah, you struggle in so many ways. Because you notice in the West, what's happening. A lot of people are having problems with being Muslims. And many times they want to what? To fit in. And you guys know that when a person wants to fit in, that means they're going to be abandoning their Muslim identity. On the other side, you'll find that other people, they want to be isolated. So when we're dealing with the West, when we're dealing with the Western culture, you will find people that are going to go to extremes. Either they want to be isolated because they know they can't fit in, or they want to fit in because they know they can't be isolated. Well, no, you have to be moderate. And so for this reason, we said that we want something called integration without assimilation, meaning that we want to hold on to our Muslim identity. We do not want to, like an ice that melts in the Western culture. So we want to stick to our Hawiyyah. We want to stick to our background, stick to our faith, but at the same time, we don't want to be isolated. So subhanallah, you don't have to be extreme and go to something called isolation. You can have friends, you can enjoy your friendships, but you have to hold on to your what? To your principles. And I really do believe that a person who is able to be moderate, that is a great person. I mean, that is a great characteristic. And that's why adil, or justice, is one of the pillars of what? Noble character. Because when it's something like a pillar, that means it's something really great. And if you have it, that's a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's great wisdom that Allah gives you. So for this reason, always we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from the middle nation. وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا, in everything that we do. And the only way you can be a middle nation is to just follow the teachings of Islam, because Islam gives limits. If you follow those limits, you're going to be in the middle. But if you start straying away from the limits and the halal and the haram that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prescribes, then what's going to happen? You are going to, even if you're not paying attention to yourself, what's going to happen is you're going to be straying away either to the far right or to the far left, meaning that you're going to fall into something called extremism. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in every salah, in every rak'ah, ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. And I remember saying last time that subhanallah, of course the sirat al-mustaqim, it's the path of Islam. But subhanallah, when you're walking directly and straight on the straight path, what happens? You're walking in this lane. So you're not going to go to the far right and you're not going to go to the far left. And I tried to subhanallah, make it easy for you guys to understand when I was talking about a person who's driving their car in a lane. If you go to the far right, you're going to hit the people, the pedestrians on the sidewalk. And if you go to the far left, you're going to fall into the opposite lane and you're going to be hitting the vehicles. So subhanallah, if you walk in your lane in the middle, inshallah, you will reach your destination, wherever it is. And here we're talking about a worldly destination. But if we want to reach the akhirah and to reach the Jannah, of course, we have to do the same thing. So I'm sure that today we do struggle with moderation more than any time in history, subhanallah. Well, I can say in terms of the days that were before, I really don't know what's going to be coming up, because the more we get closer to the day of judgment, the more fitna, subhanallah. But always remember, hold on to the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you do that, you will be the moderate nation and you will be away from extremism. Okay. And the last thing we talked about, sisters, was, when we want to deal with people that go to extremes, we have to have the way to make an argument with them, subhanallah. So Islam's balanced approach is superior to extremism. And that's something that a lot of people can say, but how can we prove that? I mean, when we're dealing with non-Muslims or people that have a different ideology that we have, it's different than ours. I mean, you have to try to prove it, okay? You can't just say words and try to say that, Islam's approach, Islam's being moderate and Islam's balanced approach is better than your extremism. You're going to be like, okay, well, prove it. Okay, what arguments do you have? And that's why, subhanallah, I always want to say this, sisters, that we need knowledge. And knowledge is going to give you this proof. That proof is going to be for you so that you, inshallah, can have stronger iman. And of course, it's going to be for others when you explain to them, Islam's balanced approach in every aspect of life. So we really do need knowledge, sisters. And subhanallah, the first ayah was Iqra. By reading, by learning, inshallah, what happens to us? We gain the faith every day, the more we read and understand Islam. And at the same time, this knowledge that we get, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to us, and it's a hadiyah, it's a gift from Allah, it also needs to be, you have to give the zakat of it. And a lot of people don't understand that, zakat is not just money-wise. Also, zakat is any good knowledge that Allah gives you. SubhanAllah, sharing it with others and teaching it to others, it makes it subhanallah, stay with you. And at the same time, it makes people benefit from it. I mean, picture anybody getting any kind of knowledge and not sharing it with others. What's going to happen? It's going to evaporate. You're going to forget it. So subhanallah, Allah made the way for you to remember knowledge by giving it to others. So subhanallah, we have to make the good knowledge extend to others. So last time, this is what we were talking about. We were talking about these arguments. How can we prove to people that are extremists that Islam's moderate or balanced approach is better? Okay. And we said, number one, you guys know that Islam, it aligns with the human nature, the fitrah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's the one who created us. So of course, His teachings are going to be aligned and in balance with this fitrah. And we all said that last time that people are bodies and souls. So when you give your body and you give your soul, what's going to happen? You're going to feel a balance, exactly like what you see right here in front of you. SubhanAllah. The body gets what it needs. It's fulfilled. You know, everything that our bodies need, whether it's eating or drinking, all the physical needs, we take them. And at the same time, when we get our spiritual needs, also the soul, subhanAllah, is satisfied. And subhanAllah, you can see it, you know, the characters. Here we're talking about characteristics. We're talking about ethics. Believe me, sisters, when you deal with a person that's balanced inside, subhanAllah, it reflects on the way they deal with people. But when you deal with a person that is not balanced, subhanAllah, it also, it reflects on the way they treat other people. Because when you've got some kind of emptiness in you, any kind of emptiness, any kind of part of you that's not balanced, it's going to affect the way you speak. You're going to be unbalanced. The way you act, you're going to be unbalanced. And here I want to go back to the talking and the walking. Remember when I told you guys, it's not just the ethics of speaking and walking. You know, it's not just that. It's more than that, sisters. It's like the inner part of you that when you inside are balanced, it shows. It shows on the way you walk. It shows on the way you talk, subhanAllah. And today in this, materialistic world that we're living in, and you would notice that more care is given to the body. I'm not saying, there are people that, for instance, that they want to stay in the church and they're not fulfilling their physical needs. But if we were to talk about this modern world, they're both wrong, of course. But I feel that, capitalism is more of like, materialistic. And today you feel that they stress more on the physical needs. So subhanAllah, materialism is affecting people in if we're talking about the balance. And that's why you feel a lot of emptiness and moral decay in a lot of people. So subhanAllah, that's our first argument, that if Allah is the one who created us and He knows what nature and what fitrah we need, and His teachings are aligned with that balance, so of course moderate Islam is going to be superior to the extremism that you guys have in terms of caring just for the body or caring just for the soul. Islam says, no, you have to care for what? Both of them. There has to be like a mix between physical and spiritual. And there has to be some kind of a balance. Okay. And here you feel the contentment, you feel satisfied. And subhanAllah, when a person feels the rida and feels the contentment in their life, wallahi, it just reflects on the way they deal with everything in this world. And that's why we find a lot of people today that, subhanAllah, the way they treat other people, the way they deal with other people, it just shows, it reflects that inside they don't have that balance. And that's why they, like, in terms of their character, in terms of their ethics, they're ill, they're sick. It's sick because, the sickness on the outside is a reflection of the sickness on the inside. No balance between the body and the soul, subhanAllah. So that's the first argument we talked about. We said that number two, also, we said that being a person that's an extremist, always extremes, they lead to injustice. Always. Because you're not putting things in the right place. And always being moderate means you are just, because you're putting everything in the right place. You're giving everything its right. And we gave an example, for instance, if we were talking about a person who always wants to be like in a certain character, they always want to give charity. Okay, giving charity is a good thing, but if you go to extremes, subhanallah, what happens is, like, when you die, you're going to leave your dependents in poverty, and that is injustice. I mean, you have to be also moderate in your charity and leave, money for your dependents that come after you. And when it comes to tarbiyah, for example, if you want to be extremely lenient, what's going to happen? You are going to oppress your child, okay? Because they are not going to have any kind of discipline. And that means you're not putting things in the right place. And at the same time, if you're really, really extremely strict, I mean, you're not going to give them any kind of self-esteem, So subhanAllah, in every aspect of life, tarbiyah, having good akhlaq, even worship, like you're extremely into worship, always just reading the Quran, always just making salah and nafila, always just making siyam nafila. Come on, you have other people that have their rights. You've got a spouse. When you're always making, subhanallah, siyam, okay, there's also a relationship between you and your spouse. When you're always just reading Quran, your children also want to be around you. So subhanallah, we have to reach the being moderate in life, subhanallah, because always when a person is extreme, it's going to lead to injustice for you and for other people. Subhanallah, dhulm, it's dhulm for you because you're not giving yourself your rights, and it's also dhulm for other people. So that's what we see today. Because there's so much extremism in this world, we notice that there's a lot of dhulm, injustice. So that's the second thing that we talked about. The third thing, or the third argument, is always a person that's extreme, they are not stable, they're unstable. And always the person who's on the middle path, they're always steadfast. SubhanAllah, why? I mean, let's go back to the road. Like when you're walking in the road in the middle, you're driving, SubhanAllah, you're going to be steadfast. You're going to stay in that what? You're going to stay in that lane. But if you go to the extremes, what's going to happen? You're going to be unstable because you're going to be hitting this vehicle or hitting that pedestrian. And that's exactly how people that are extreme in life. I mean, they're walking in this life, but they're not achieving anything, And that's why Ibn al-Qayyim, he gave an analogy. What did he say? He said that trouble only befalls that which is at the extremes, and the middle is always what? Always protected. SubhanAllah. If you always stay in the middle, you're safe. But if you go to extremes, trouble befalls on you. So that's very true, subhanAllah. And we gave examples of that. Like, subhanAllah, if you say, for instance, we were talking about perfectionism. A person who wants to be perfect always, what's going to happen to them? They're going to crash. They're going to burn out because you can't be perfect. I mean, that's one of the things that we have to learn in life, that, the kamal, or being perfect, it's lillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have limited abilities, limited capabilities. So if you're going to always be a perfectionist and always going to think that your children are going to be perfect, what's going to happen? You're going to crush. Okay. But if you are moderate, you will always improve and achieve things in the long run. And we gave examples also for political systems. Like if you have authoritarian dictators in subhanallah, what happens to them? Always being extreme is going to cause revolutions. It's going to cause collapses. There is no political system that can stay long if there is, there's no not being moderate, either being too lenient. SubhanAllah, if the ruler is going to be lenient, it's going to be disorder in the country. If the leader is going to be an authoritarian, it's going to lead to a collapse because, of course, there's going to be a revolution. People can take to a certain extent, and then what's going to happen to them? They're going to burst, subhanAllah. And we gave another example, for instance, subhanAllah, a person that they're in the physical training, they're not moderate. So what's going to happen to them? They're going to get very exhausted and they're going to burn out. and they're going to fall into something called overtraining. And instead of getting strength, they're going to lose a lot of strength. They're going to have injury, and they're going to be forced to stop. So for this reason, qalilun da'im, doing something moderately, even if it's in a small portion, is better than doing it with a big portion and not being consistent. So if you want consistency in anything that you want, and here I want to go to the word consistency. The only way you can have consistency in your life and to go on in anything that you plan to do, like for instance, memorizing the Quran or doing nafilah or being on a good, healthy diet, anything you want to do or achieve in life, or like, for instance, you want to build a house or buy a house, so you want to save for that. Anything that you want to be consistent in, you have to be moderate in. If you go to any types of extreme and you put or force upon yourself something that you cannot do every day, that's going to lead in the long run for you to crash or to give up. So Islam is a very realistic and practical religion, subhanAllah. And that's why Islam teaches us to be what? To be moderate and put things in their place. Now, the fourth argument here we would say is that when you walk on the middle path, that's going to maximize benefits. You're going to get a lot of benefits when you walk on the middle path. But if you go to extremism, that's going to cause a lot of what? It's going to cause a lot of harm. So subhanAllah, for example, here they give you an example. If you're going to be extremely strict, okay, you might produce discipline. Like a lot of people, they're like, I have to be very, very, very strict with my children. Okay, you're going to get something good out of that, which is discipline. But it's also going to produce intolerance, and it's going to cause something called despair. And that's going to be what? Harm. So here, what do? In Arabic, they say, imsik al-asa min al-wasat, which means that if you've got a stick, where should you hold the stick from? From the middle, okay? So you have to be, to one extent, you have to be strict in certain things so that your children can get the discipline. But at the same time, you have to be a little lenient so that your children can tolerate and not reach the point to where they are what? They have despair. I mean, you do want to have some kind of self-esteem, and you want to hold on to that relationship between you and your son or what? And your daughter. So subhanAllah, the middle path, it gives you more benefits, but the extremism, it always gives you more what? Gives you more harm. Okay? And the last thing that we were to reach or to talk about, or actually the before the last, is something called integration versus fragmentation. What does this mean, subhanAllah? It means that when you go to extremes, what happens? You have something called fragmentation, which means to separate. And here we're going to be talking about, which is called the secularism. And it's in Arabic, it's called al-almaniyah. And you guys know that secularism means to separate the religion from aspects of life, okay? So we don't want to be people that separate things. We want to be people that integrate things. Separating is called fragmentation, and combining things is called integration. And I'm going to give you guys an example. Like, let's give an example of separation or fragmentation. We have two extremes. We have people that are secular. The secular view is that you separate religion from life. So that's an extreme, okay? And then we've got the people that are extremely religious to the point where every minute to them is just doing rituals, no relaxation whatsoever, okay? Always praying, always fasting. There's no relaxation. So we've got extreme religious people, and we've got people that really don't care about religion, and they separated religion from life. Both extreme, sisters, they are called fragmentation. You separated, okay? You separated religion from life. But subhanAllah, Islam does something called integration. Integration means it combines. Like, for example, let's give a very simple example. Like when we say Bismillah before we eat. I mean, here you are doing something physical, which is eating, but you are still aware of the spiritual part. I mean, you remember to mention Allah. You said Bismillah. So here you did something physical, which is eating, but you combined it with the deen, okay? So it's like you combined the dunya with the akhirah. You combined the world with the deen. You didn't do something called secularism. You combined. You didn't separate. So here, what did you have to lose? I mean, mashallah, you got the akhirah and you got the barakah of saying Bismillah. And at the same time, you are enjoying the food. So you got both the worldly act and the spiritual awareness together. This is what Islam is teaching you. And that's how a Muslim, subhanAllah, is very well rounded. You guys, subhanAllah, even when I teach my students, I tell them, look to any act of worship in Islam. Like, let me give you guys an example of salah, okay? Salah, it combines both the spiritual part and the physical part. Both. Let's look at it this way. Like, where's the physical part of salah? It's when you stand up and make the movements, right? You're either qiyam or you are ruku' or you are sujood. You're prostrating, okay? So this is the physical part of salah. But there's also a spiritual part of salah when there's khushu', when you're reading the Quran, you're doing something called tadabbur, right? So subhanAllah, the salah itself combines both spiritual and physical. Picture us just reading Quran and not moving. Or picture the opposite, just moving and not reading Quran. You know, Islam doesn't look to one aspect and leaves the other. It doesn't do something called separation. It does something called integration, combining the spiritual and the what? Physical. And that is what it means to be moderate, to combine both of them. But going extremely to the physical part, like, for example, look at the people who used to worship the idols. Here they were only caring about the physical part, seeing an idol in front of them, materialistic thing, but they didn't care about the inner soul. You know, how could you be worshiping an idol that does no good? That idol does not hear you. That idol doesn't see you. So here they're doing something physical, materialistic, but it's not satisfying them spiritually. Now let's look to the other side. You'll find people like Buddhists, okay, doing yoga and trying to satisfy their spiritual part, but they're not making any movements, you know? So in order for you to be a whole you have to be doing the spiritual with the physical. That makes you more aware, you know? So every part of you is making that salah. Let's give another example. For instance, Hajj, subhanallah. Let's say, for instance, the sa'i bayna safa wal marwa, when you're going through the safa or marwa, or going around the Kaaba. Of course, there's the physical part, which is you are making tawaf around the Kaaba, right? And the Kaaba is to the left of you. And you are aware that every tawaf is counted by starting at the black stone and ending up there. So this is the physical part, okay? But at the same time, there is the spiritual part inside of you. What is that spiritual part? It's number one, when you're making that dua, you know, making tawaf around the Kaaba and making every dua you want in this world, going back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for anything that you need. And it also teaches you another thing, spiritually. It's like Allah is teaching you, just like right now, you are in the Kaaba. And what are you doing? You are making tawaf around the Kaaba. And this Kaaba, it symbolizes, you know, worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you walking, it's like your sa'i. It's your journey in this world. So it's teaching us that just like, look at this spiritually, just like you are making tawaf around the Kaaba in this Hajj or Umrah journey, and you are always keeping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, in front of you, and always making sure that you want to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and being moderate and not going to extremes. The same thing in your life. It's teaching you spiritually that just like you were on a journey in Hajj or Umrah, you are also on a journey in this world. And you should always remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So subhanAllah, it's like the Kaaba symbolizes obeying Allah's commandments. And in every journey you take in this world, that you are aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have that awareness, you have that taqwa, subhanAllah. So what could be more beautiful than being moderate in life, being able to do something called combining between the spiritual and the physical, and not being separate like secularists are in this world. That's why they have no balance, subhanAllah, no balance whatsoever. And the last argument here we could say is historical evidence. I mean, we want to give you evidence. History proves that being moderate and having a balance means that you're going to go on. And not having a balance and having extremism, it's going to lead to what? Corruption. And here they were giving us an example, subhanAllah, of the Khulafa al-Rashidin, the rightly guided Khalifas, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali. SubhanAllah, you will notice that these were the flourishing periods for the Muslim Ummah. SubhanAllah. Why? Because the caliphates, they combined faith with reason and tolerance. SubhanAllah. And that's why the people prospered in those eras. But as the Muslims started to deviate and go away from Islam, when you go away from Islam, what does that mean? That means you fall into something called extremism. And when we fell into something called extremism, we became weak. And that's why colonization came. And that's why moral decay came. And that's why we were occupied by Europe and other countries. And that's why the last, subhanAllah, the Ottoman Empire, it collapsed. So subhanAllah, even history proves that's the greatest evidence that when we Muslims stick to our religion, when we are moderate, we flourish. But when we deviate from Islam, that means we deviated from moderation. That means we fell into extremism. That means that, you know, all of the enemies of Islam, they're going to be waiting for that. And they're just going to make every step they can to, you know, to punish the Muslim Ummah for that thing. SubhanAllah. And so these are the greatest arguments I believe that you could use to talk to people that are want us to be extremists. The last one is that, subhanAllah, the balance, even in spiritually, like subhanAllah, we were talking about having a physical and spiritual balance. But here, even if you wanted to take one aspect of life, you will notice that that aspect also has balance. Like, for instance, let's take spiritual balance. You guys all know that when we want to deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're talking about, of course, spirituality. In Arabic, they call it tazkiyah. Okay? Even in tazkiyah, you have to be wasat. You have to be moderate. How? Like when we're dealing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we live with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala between hope and fear. So it doesn't work for us to feel just the hope, and Allah is merciful. So do whatever you want to do. That's called falling into extremism in spirituality. Because, okay, Allah is merciful, but you don't want to go to extremism in believing that Allah is going to, you know, have mercy on you and forgive you for all your sins without you doing your part. And at the same time, if you go to the fear only, believing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish you, this is also called extremism. So what's right is to be in between, to feel that Allah, in Arabic we say Allah ghafurun rahim, Allah is merciful, but Allah also is shadidul iqab. He subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punishes. So we have to have hope and fear. So in spirituality also, we have to have something called a what? We have to have a balance. So subhanAllah, these sisters are the 4 pillars of noble character. If you have them, you have a great gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And all the great characteristics are going to stem from them. And to remind you, we said that these 4 pillars were sabr, which means self-control in a world full of distractions. Number 2, we said courage or shaja'ah in a world full of fear and hypocrisy. We also said 3, chastity in a world full of sexuality. And the last pillar we talked about was today's pillar, which is to have what? To have justice or adl, to put things in their right place. In between brackets, one form of adl is to be moderate in a world full of extremism. So subhanAllah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us these what? To give us these characters. Okay, so that was unit 1 of chapter 3. We were talking about the pillars of noble character. But in the remaining time that we also have unpleasant character, sisters. I mean, subhanAllah, we always want to learn the good so that we can follow it. But we also need to know what is wrong so that we can stay away from it. Just like there are pillars of good character, there are also pillars of repugnant or unpleasant character. And these characteristics or these pillars are also 4. And 3 of them are the opposite of what we took. Like we said, we talked about adil, which is justice, and one of them is called what? One of them is called oppression. So oppression, sisters, or dhulm, is one of the pillars of bad character. Also, shahwa is another pillar of bad character, following your desires, following your shahwa. And here, this would be the opposite of one of the good characters that we talked about, which is what? Chastity, subhanAllah. Another pillar of bad character is anger, al-ghadab. And you can say that anger or ghadab is the opposite of sabr, which is self-control. So those 3 have opposites. And I'm not going to be talking about them. Why? Because we already talked about the what? The opposite. Now there's one more of those 4 pillars of bad character, which is remaining, which is, what do you guys think it would be? We said the pillars of bad character are oppression, which is the opposite of justice, shahwa, which is the opposite of iffa or chastity, and ghadab or anger, which is the opposite of self-control or sabr. What would you guys think is the 4th pillar of bad character? Yes, Sister Samira.
Cowardliness.
What is it again?
Cowardliness, being afraid.
Oh,
Being
yeah, because
scared.
you meant the opposite of what? Shaja'a? Is that what you
Yes,
meant? Well,
yes,
actually,
that's
no,
right.
it's not that one, actually. No, that's why I told you 3 of them have their opposites. Okay. But this one, it's by itself. Do you guys want to try to figure it out?
Is it being hasty? I don't know.
Being hasty, it
No,
has to deal
hasty.
with it. Hasty, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes. Like,
Well, it kind of has to do with it. Okay. It
mm,
kind of has to do with it. Right.
okay.
Yes. But it was a good try, Sister Jadia. Okay, you guys ready? I'm going to unfold it. It is, I forgot to write it by himself. I just noticed that. It's Jahilliyyah, sisters. It's Jahilliyyah. Ignorance. 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 Subhanallah. Ignorance, it's one of the worst things that a person could have. One of the worst things. And by the way, like I was thinking that maybe the best one for the 4th one would be arrogance. But then when you dig in more, and I'm going to leave that as a homework for you guys, okay? I'm going to leave it as a homework for the next class. Which is that, like, I was thinking that the 4th pillar would be arrogance, because I was thinking, that was what led Iblis to get out of the Jannah. But then I found out that actually arrogance is a branch of ignorance. You get what I'm saying? So arrogance is a form of ignorance. So that's why it stems from it. But ignorance is a really great thing. So are you guys ready for us to get into the word ignorance or jahil? In Arabic, it's called what? Jahil. Jahil. Now here, let's ask ourselves, what is the literal meaning of jahil? Okay. So if you guys open to the Arabic dictionary, you will find that, well, before we open to the dictionary, I just want to say something. Like, one of the most common words that we use in Islamic conversations is jahiliyyah. We use it a lot, by the way. And the problem is that many times when you use a word many times, you might start using it without understanding what it really means. Okay. So we have to pay attention to that. A lot of people, when they come to just translate jahiliyyah, they just say it's ignorance. But no, you have to go into more depth. If you open the Arabic dictionary to find out what does jahiliyyah mean, well, actually it comes from the root or the fi'l or the verb jahala. So jahiliyyah is from jahala. Okay. And it is the opposite of two things in the Arabic. Okay, so jahl is the opposite of two words. You know, like when you say you have antonyms. So the antonyms or the opposite of jahiliyyah in Arabic are two things. It comes to mean the opposite of ilm. And you guys know that ilm is what? Is knowledge. So the first thing that jahiliyyah means is it's the opposite of ilm or knowledge. And so literally it would mean to be ignorant. So when you don't have knowledge, you are ignorant. So no knowledge, that is the meaning of jahiliyyah, the opposite of ilm. But it also comes to mean the opposite of aql. What does aql mean, sisters? Aql. What is aql in Arabic? Did you guys translate it for me? Aql. Aql. It's right here in front of you guys. Yes, Sister Samira.
I'm just taking a guess. To be intelligent, to be rational.
Yeah, you're close because rational has to do with the brain. So aql in Arabic.
Reasoning.
Brain.
Reasoning.
Excuse me,
Reasoning.
Sister. Reasoning. Yeah, okay. But yeah, it's the opposite of having rationalization, which has to do with aql. You guys, aql in Arabic, it's brain, your brain, okay? So it could be, and remember, they start with the ain, the letter ain. So in Arabic, the word jahl is the opposite of ilm, which is knowledge, and it's the opposite of aql, which is the what? The brain. What do we mean by the opposite of aql? It means to be out of control or to speak out of whim, like to be impulsive, no self-control, or to take an action irrationally without thinking through it. Remember, Sister Jaria, when right now you told me to be haste, right? Yeah, so being haste is a part of ignorance. Why? Because you didn't use your rationalization. Before you speak, you should what? You should think. Okay? Let me see what you guys put. Yeah, okay, Sister Jaria. So here I want you guys to understand, because we're going to give examples. So a person that has jahl is a person that either is ignorant because they don't have the knowledge, or they are mindlessness because it's the opposite of aql. What is a person that's mindlessless? It means they speak without thinking. So jahl means either two things. It means people who don't think and people who don't know. That's what they mean, to make it like simple. People who don't think, which is the opposite of aql. They don't think. They speak before they think. They're mindless. And people who don't know, that's the opposite of ilm. So this is a lot. We have this a lot in our society. You have to understand that. Whether you're talking about people that are Muslims or non-Muslims. SubhanAllah, when you look up to people these days, you will find either a lot of them, people don't know or they don't think. And you guys have to understand that true knowledge and thinking, sometimes they have some kind of relationship between them, but they're not always dependent on one another. I mean, there's a difference between not knowing and not thinking. So let's give an example. I'm going to give you two examples. I mean, you could have somebody who doesn't have a lot of knowledge, but they think, right? Picture some people. Like you'll find people that they don't have any kind of degree. Okay, so they don't have a lot of knowledge in terms of degrees, but they think, they use their brain. Okay, and sometimes you have people that have a lot of knowledge. Okay, but what do? But they don't think. So having knowledge doesn't necessarily mean that you think. And right now I'm going to give you guys two examples, and I'm sure you're going to understand them right away. But before I give those two examples, let's just try to make like some kind of small revision and summary. I want you guys to understand. Again, one of the most common words we use in Islamic conversation, sisters, is jahilliyyah. Jahilliyyah is a noun. In order to understand what it means, we have to put it back into its verbal form. The verb of jahilliyyah is jahala. If you open to an Arabic dictionary, you will find that jahl is the opposite of two things. It is the opposite of ilm, meaning it is the opposite of knowledge. So a person who has jahl is a person who doesn't know because they have no knowledge. So that's the first meaning of jahl, having no knowledge and not knowing. And that's called what? Of course, ignorance. The other meaning of jahl in Arabic is it's the opposite of aql. And aql means the brain. And you guys know that Allah gives us the brain to think. I mean, when you say a person is jahil, which is the opposite of aql or brain, does that mean that that person doesn't have a brain? No, biologically, if you come to that person, you will find a brain in their head. But what does it mean literally? It means they're not using it. They're not thinking, okay? So that's why they say it's jahl means the opposite of aql or brain. In other words, you have a brain, but you're not using it. So that brings us to the second meaning of jahl, people who don't think. They're not using their brain. And you guys know that of course, a person who doesn't think means that they're mindless. They have mindlessness, excuse me. That's why we have a picture of a man with a head, but no brain. We don't mean it literally, but we mean it more technically, like they're not using their brains. Okay? So we've got people in society that have jahl. Either they have both of them or they have one of them. So how many people out there don't know, you guys? And they give no, they don't give any kind of priority to learning. And you guys know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first ayah he set down in the cave of Hira was what? Iqra. Okay? So we've got a lot of people out there that have jahl because they don't have knowledge. They don't know. And that's wrong. I mean, you should give in a lot of time to know, to learn, to read, okay? Especially when it comes to your religion. And here I just want to explain again, when it comes to women, sisters, we as women, it doesn't mean if we're women and we're married and we have children that we don't learn. No, we have to learn our religion. So we don't want to be from the jahilin, not knowing. So that's the first meaning, the opposite of ilm, people who don't know. And the second thing is, sometimes there are people that they have the knowledge, but they don't want to think. How many people out there, they know this thing is haram, but they act impulsively? They don't think. They don't use they're irrational, okay? And so they do things without having any kind of control, okay? So here they have the knowledge, but they don't want to use their brain and think right. And this happens a lot, especially with women, many times, because they're very emotional and anything affects them. Okay, this thing is haram. You know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he prescribed this thing for you, it's for your own good. So why are you acting impulsively? Why are you caring about what other people are saying about you? Subhanallah. So we've got these two problems. So here I just want to make sure, did you guys now understand the two meanings? Because I'm going to be talking about them the whole time right now. So a person that is jahl is either a person who doesn't know or a person who doesn't think. You don't use your brain. That's why they said that the people who don't know, it's the opposite of knowledge, because they don't know, okay? And the people who don't think, it's the opposite of aql, because they literally are not using their brains. Because biologically they do have the brain, but they're just not using it. And we said that there's a relationship between knowing and thinking. Knowledge and thinking, they're two things that come together, but they're not necessarily dependent on each other. And I proved that to you guys. I told you sometimes you have people who don't have a lot of knowledge, but they use their brains. And sometimes the opposite. You've got people that have PhDs and they've got a lot of knowledge, but they don't use their brains. They're not thinking. And I'm going to give you an example of both of them. Are you guys ready? Let's give an example of people who don't have knowledge, but they think. One of the greatest examples for that I could give is the story of the Bedouin when he was asked about the existence of Allah. picture when I say Bedouin here. When I say Bedouin, a person who has, he's just an ordinary Bedouin guy who doesn't have any kind of extravagant knowledge, you know, a person who lives in the desert. So he doesn't have knowledge, but he could think. So let's go back to what we were talking about. He doesn't know, he doesn't have a lot of knowledge, but he uses his brain, he thinks. So here they asked that Bedouin man, how did you reach to the conclusion that a God exists, that Allah exists? So what did he say? I'm going to say it in Arabic and then I'm going to explain it in English. He said, al-ba'ratu tadullu ala al-ba'ir wal-atharu yadullu ala al-masir فسماء ذات أبراج وأرض ذات فجاج ألا يدل على اللطيف الخبير. Oh, and he said also وبحار ذات أمواج ألا تدل على اللطيف الخبير. In other words, what is he saying? You guys know that a Bedouin lives in the desert, okay? And you know that there are camels and donkeys in the desert. So what did he say? He said, when they asked him, how do you know your Lord exists? He replied, camel dung indicates camels. Donkey dung indicates donkeys. Footprints indicate travel. So the sky with its constellations and the seas with its waves, don't they indicate the all-knowing, the all-powerful? Let's put it into simple words. He's like, when you see, like when you're living in the desert, you guys know that when the camel, he poops, okay? Like if you guys were walking in the desert and you saw camel poop, what would you say? I'm asking you guys. If you saw camel poop, what would you say? I mean, would that poop come from the sky? It would fall from the sky? I'm asking you. Are you guys awake?
Yes.
Yes, sister. Sister Samira, if you saw camel poop or camel dung, I mean, where did that camel dung come from?
From the camel.
From the camel, right? So you're going to make some kind of relationship, right? You're going to say, well, the camel dung, it indicates that a camel passed by. The same thing, if you saw donkey poop, you would be like, okay, of course, there must have been a donkey that passed by, okay? And also he's like, you know, living in the desert, many times you see footprints. So if you saw footprints in the sand, you would know that people had traveled, you know, there was like a caravan that traveled in the desert. So he didn't have all that knowledge like people have today in physics and going to the moon and the constellations and all of that stuff. He didn't have any kind of degree. He used his simple little brain. He was thinking. He didn't have knowledge, but he used his brain and he thought. He's like, if camel dung indicates a camel, if donkey dung indicates donkey passed by, if footprints indicate that there was a caravan that traveled, well then look to this vast sky and the constellations. Look at the vast sea with its waves. Don't they indicate that there is a designer? Subhanallah. So subhanallah, here I gave you guys an example of a person who doesn't have knowledge, but they use their brains, okay? So they think. Let's give an example of the opposite. A person who does have knowledge, they have a PhD, and they're very intellectual, and they've got an overdose of knowledge, but they simply don't want to use their brain and think. Let's give an example. Like I remember once there was a da'iyah, and he was making da'wah, and this man with PhD comes to him, and he asked him, does Allah exist? He said, no. He's like, how sure are you that Allah does not exist? He said, 99.99%. And then he asked him a question. He said that, from your point of view, the knowledge that you have about this whole universe, you know, how much do you think you have knowledge? Do you know what he said? He said 0.00001%. Okay? Okay. So then he came back to him and told him, well, if you are saying that the knowledge you have is 0.00001% in this world, how can you be 99.99% that there's no God? You know, how did you make that judgment if you are you don't have that knowledge? SubhanAllah. So SubhanAllah, he's dealing with a person with a PhD, but he He's got all that intellect and knowledge and overdose of knowledge, but he didn't want to use his brain. Come on, if you just use your brain like that Bedouin guy, you would have reached to the point that everything in this world proves that there's a God. Everything. I mean, subhanAllah, Allah made so many ayat in this world that prove that. If he could, subhanAllah, he got to the point that everything relates with other things, subhanAllah, or things indicate the presence of other things, then why didn't you, from learning about this vast universe and every, subhanAllah, every law that you learned in this universe, doesn't it prove that there is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? I mean, just looking at the smallest things, sisters, like a dalil called dalil al-hidayah, the guidance. It's a guidance proof that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. I mean, I want to ask you guys a question. For instance, a cat that digs into the ground and then does its poop and then comes after it uses the bathroom, it covers it up. Did a cat ever go to a school of etiquette? Did the cat learn the adab of using the bathroom? Who taught him that? Who guided him? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The bees that go and make the honeycombs, subhanAllah, they look like, subhanAllah, architecture, like it's like architect, the six sides, subhanAllah. You would be like, who taught the bee to make that kind of shape, subhanAllah, as if he had like a ruler and he drew it? Who taught the bees to do that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhanallah, the baby comes out of the womb of the mother not knowing anything. Subhanallah, who taught the baby how to suck on the breast of the mother? I mean, it needs a lot of muscles. Who taught the baby to accept, to be breastfed from the mother? Who taught it how to be breastfed and to suck on her breast? Who? He didn't go to a school. He came out of the womb of his mother not knowing anything. Who taught him? This is called dalil al-hidayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who taught him. So many times, and that's something that, wallahi, it's very shameful. Go to many countries like Japan, go to countries like China. If you come to them in terms of knowledge, mashallah, they have great knowledge, very great knowledge in like materialistic things. But subhanallah, where is that knowledge when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It's like we're telling these people, you've got knowledge, but you're not using your brain. So that's what I wanted you guys to understand, that what does jahil mean? It doesn't mean like you don't always come to a person that doesn't have a degree and say you're jahil. No, if he used his brain, he could be jahil in terms of he doesn't have the knowledge, but as long as he used his brain, that's a good sign. And it doesn't necessarily mean that a person who's got a degree doesn't have jahil. Maybe they've got the knowledge part, but they don't have the using the brain part. Okay. So living in this world in the year 2025, we have to understand that it's not a surprise to find people with all the technology, to find people that are what? Still ignorant. Sisters, the years of ignorance, they're not over. True that the revelation came and the era of Islam came, but if you do not follow Islam, even today, with all the technology, you are still in ignorance. You are still in ignorance. The only way you can get out of ignorance is by following what? Following Islam. Why? And that's what we're going to talk about right now. And this leads us to the technical meaning of what? Of jahil. Technically, it means the absence of religious guidance as a result, which results in corruption. SubhanAllah. When there was absence of religious guidance, because you guys especially know in Arabia, the last prophet that was sent to the Arabs was who? Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. And so the people of Arabia, between Ibrahim and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they were called in Arabic the Ahl al-Fatra, which is a period of time where they had no prophets. So the absence of religious guidance through prophets and books resulted in what? Corruption that dominated every aspect of their what? Of their life. So in Islamic history, When we use the word Jahilliyyah to refer to the period before Islam, or we call it the years of ignorance or the period of ignorance, this is true. When the dawn of Islam came and subhanAllah, the revelation came, what did the revelation do? It got rid of the ignorance. Why? How did the revelation or Islam destroy Jahiliyyah? It destroyed it from the both fronts that I was talking about. Remember when I told you guys that Jahiliyyah is either not having knowledge or not thinking clearly. So when Islam came, it brought knowledge, right? It brought us the book. It brought us the teachings of the Prophet. It brought us the first ayah that says, Iqra. It brought us the obligation that we as Muslim people have to learn. So Islam brought us knowledge to learn. And that's the opposite of ignorance. It's opposite of Jahiliyyah. And it also taught us to do something called clear thinking. Because clear thinking also ends the Jahiliyyah. Like for instance, how did Islam come with clear thinking? Teaching people to be mindful. Why are you worshiping those idols? Use your brain. I mean, how in the world could you worship an idol that you made with your own hands? And sometimes they would make them out of what? Out of tamir. And when they would get hungry, they would eat them. So alhamdulillah, sisters, for the ni'mah, for the blessing of Islam, for the revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to us to get us out of something called ignorance. Ignorance meaning that they didn't have knowledge, or they had knowledge of some things, but they weren't doing something called clear thinking. So that's the meaning, the technical meaning of what? Of, revelation. The revelation came to get rid of something called what? Ignorance. And in any time that you're living, sisters, where you find people that don't have the knowledge, or they have knowledge, but they're not doing something called clear thinking, you can call them Jahiliyyah. Jahiliyyah doesn't necessarily mean the period of time that was before the revelation of Islam. Anybody who doesn't follow the teachings of Islam, they are going to be in Jahiliyyah. And I'm going to prove that to you guys in the remaining 15 minutes that we have together, or actually the 20 minutes that we have together. And subhanAllah, here we're going to ask a question. Well, did the Quran use the word Jahiliyyah? Yeah, it did. In the Quran, the word Jahiliyyah, it was used 4 times. I'm not talking about Jahil. I'm actually talking about the word Jahiliyyah. If you go back to the Quran, you will notice that the word Jahiliyyah was used 4 times in the Quran. And you guys are going to notice, my dear sisters, that all 4 of them, even though they were used more than 1,400 years ago, these 4 things exist today. And anybody who does any of these things, there are people that have Jahiliyyah. So see, one of the worst things a person could have, one of the worst characteristics, it is one of the greatest pillars of unpleasant character, is to have something called Jahiliyyah or ignorance. Meaning either you don't know, or you know, but you don't think. So let's look at the ayahs and try to figure out, sisters, what are those 4 things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, and he attributed Jahiliyyah to these 4 things. Before we say these 4 things, I just want to stress on the point that, again, the Quran mentions the term Jahiliyyah 4 times. And that's something that's extremely profound, because the Quran actually attributes Jahiliyyah to 4 things. And we want to pay attention to those 4 things, because they are actually 4 aspects of life. And you will find that even in our modern world, people have that Jahiliyyah. Another thing is, it's profound, and it's very great to notice that the 4 ayahs we're going to be talking about that do mention the word Jahiliyyah, you will notice that they are in Madani surahs. You guys know that there are Mekki surahs, which are surahs that were sent down before the Hijrah, and there are Madani surahs, that are surahs that were sent down after the Hijrah. SubhanAllah, you will notice that all 4 times of them, they were Madani surahs. Why? Because after the Madani period, Islam was able to eradicate something called Jahiliyyah, because Islam worked 13 years before the hijrah to get rid of something called Jahilliyyah. And it really showed in the Madani period. That's why Islam didn't mention Jahilliyyah in the Meccan period. Why? Because it was in the phase of eradicating Jahilliyyah in that society. And that teaches us something, that if you want to build Islam, first of all, you have to get rid of Jahilliyyah. You cannot build Islam on Jahil. You can't. First of all, I always explain it this way. Picture, sisters, that you guys want to clean any room of your house, okay? What do you do first before you wipe? Don't you guys come and you bring the broom and you do what? You pick up all the dust and all the, the dirt that's in your house. So you clean first. So first of all, you clean, you get rid of the dirt, and then you put the water and you wash it out, right? So if you want to build something, you always have to get rid of the what's wrong. And that's why the Meccan period was doing something called what? Takhliyah. Takhliyah means to get rid of something. And then the Madani period was doing something called tahliyah, adding the good things in. You cannot build good character on bad things. You can't. And that's why a lot of people, they try to build good character in their children by doing something like they cannot differentiate between what do they call it, like culture and haram and halal. So a lot of parents, what they do is, instead of teaching their children that we fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to make that child aware, to have God awareness, that you're doing this thing for Allah, and then build the character. Not to come and say, oh, all the people in the village are going to see you. Here you're building something on something wrong, okay? So first of all, you have to teach your child that we fear Allah, not we fear society. So you never build something good on something bad. Get rid of the thing that's bad and then build. So that's why we noticed that in the Meccan period, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to get rid of the bad thing, which was the Jahilliyyah, in every aspect of life, in theology, in morals, and everything, okay? When you get rid of Jahilliyyah in the Madani phase, here, what are you going to be able to do? You're going to fix everything up, okay? So here, let's go to the 4 times. And here, I just want to stress on something. Why is it important for us to know about Jahilliyyah? Jahilliyyah is something that's wrong and it's evil. Well, we have to understand that we as Muslims always study things that are wrong and evil, because our intention is to recognize that thing and to what? And to avoid it. Okay? So let's talk about the types of Jahilliyyah. We've got 4 types, and I want you guys to look at them before I go into the details. The first type of Jahilliyyah is the Jahilliyyah in what? In the belief. The second kind of Jahilliyyah is the Jahilliyyah in law. The third type of Jahilliyyah is Jahilliyyah in morality. And the fourth type of Jahilliyyah is Jahilliyyah in terms of tribalism. So these 4 things, I want you guys to think about them as I speak. You're going to notice that they're all, they exist in today's world, even amongst the Muslims. The Muslim societies, they have them. Let's start off with the Jahiliyyah and the belief. This ayah, of course, is in Surah Ali Imran, ayah 154. And in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the battle of Uhud. And you guys know that in the battle of Uhud, there was Abdullah bin Ubay bin Abi Salul, and he was the greatest hypocrite of Medina. And in this battle, he had hypocrites with him. And they went to a certain extent following the Prophet. And then in the middle of the journey, or in the middle of the, going to the battle of Uhud, what happened? They withdrew. Okay? So anyways, this ayah is talking about a Jahiliyyah in belief. What it has to do with your aqidah. What is the Jahiliyyah of the belief? These hypocrites, you guys know in the battle of Uhud, which came after the battle of Badr, there was a great loss in the Muslim, in the Sahaba. Like we had about 70 shuhada from the Sahaba. One of them was Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib, the uncle of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Also, we had the first ambassador of Islam, like Mus'ab ibn Umair. So there was a great loss. We had about 70 Sahaba that died as martyrs or shuhada in the battle of Uhud. So what did the hypocrites start to do when the Muslims came back to Medina? And if you guys all remember the story, remember when the Prophet ﷺ told them to stay on the mountain no matter what happens, even if they see the Muslims having victory, and to stay there because the Prophet knew that maybe they would come from behind the mountain and attack them. And that's what happened, subhanAllah. When they saw the Muslims having victory, they didn't follow the orders of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So they came down the mountain, and at that time, Khalid ibn al-Walid, radiyallahu an, he was a kafir, and he came with the enemies, and they attacked the Muslims from behind. Okay? So anyways, 70 of the Sahaba died as shuhada in this battle, the Battle of Uhud. When the Muslims came back to Medina, what were the hypocrites telling them? They were telling them, we told you guys that if you don't follow the Prophet, I mean, if you guys had followed us and went back, then none of you guys would have died. So here they have a Jahilliyyah in the belief. They are making themselves think, even though they've got the knowledge. Here we have to understand something. We said that having Jahilliyyah is either not having the knowledge or not using your brain. Here, I'm sure they have the knowledge, but they're just not using their brain. They're not being rational. They don't want to have something called clear thinking. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching them that even if they stayed in their houses and they did not go to jihad, you guys all know that everybody has a certain, lifespan. And when your lifespan is over, what happens to you? You're going to die. Whether it was in a plane, whether it was in your bed, whether it was in jihad. And here I told you guys many times, sisters, that being courageous is not going to make your lifespan shorter. And being a coward is not going to make your lifespan longer. Like we gave an example of Khalid ibn al-Walid. Khalid ibn al-Walid, who after the Battle of Uhud, subhanAllah, he became a Muslim, but he was a very courageous Muslim. I mean, most of the battles with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he was always in them. And subhanAllah, there was no part of his body, it was always wounded, every part of his body, because he would either have like a sword go into his body or an arrow, but subhanAllah, despite the fact that Khalid ibn al-Walid was very courageous, but Allah did not will for him to die in the battlefield. He died on his bed. So him being courageous didn't make him have a shorter lifespan. We have to understand that our lifespan, and this is something in our aqeedah, that a person dies only when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, destined for that person to die. So here they had jahl in something called the what? In the belief. And how many people today, sisters, that you deal with in terms of their aqeedah, how many people have jahl out there? A lot of people have jahl in their belief. They don't understand that, a person, their rizq is from Allah. Their time span, it's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destined, They don't understand the qada and the qadar. A lot of things that have to do with the belief, they don't understand it, subhanAllah. So this is a type of what? This is a type of Jahilliyyah. And here we have to understand that these people are exactly like the secularist people today. The people that, they separate between deen and the world. So these people, what they're saying is that if you stayed with us, then you guys wouldn't have died. What is their presumption built upon? It's based on a theology of secularism, a theology of there's no God, a theology that doesn't believe in something called musabbib al-asbab. They just believe in cause and effect. Okay, what you do and what you don't do. No, but we have to understand that, okay, we have to do our job, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to take us accountable of doing our job. But in the end, even if you do your job, there are things that you don't control. If Allah willed for you to die, you're going to die. SubhanAllah. So this is Jahilliyyah, to make a separation between the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the world that we live in. A great Jahilliyyah. Okay, so we have to pay attention to that. And we have to understand that only in the hands of Allah is our life. That's a great and very important thing. And when I talked about courage, I stressed on that point. And I said that, subhanAllah, if you don't have that belief in you, then you're never going to be courageous. You have to understand that there are two things, everything's in the hands of Allah, but especially these two things, which are your life and your rizq. Do your part, but they are in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's called Jahilliyyah in your belief. Another form of Jahilliyyah mentioned in Surah Al-Ma'idah, which is also a Madani surah, is the Jahilliyyah in law. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking, and how much Jahilliyyah do we have today in law? Allah is asking us, أَفَحُكْمُ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ يَبْغُونَ وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ مِنَ اللَّهِ حُكْمًا لِقَوْمٍ يُوقِنُونَ. Allah is telling the people, and here we're talking about Bani Israel and the people who reject the law of Allah. Allah is asking them, Allah is surprised from them. He's telling them, you guys want the hukum or the legislation of people, and you don't want the legislation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Subhanallah, Allah is the one who is Hakim. And this is what all of society today you are noticing, especially in secular countries. Most countries are secular. They do not take Islam as the legislation. So what are they doing? It's like they're, saying that the legislation of people is better than the legislation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Isn't this, sisters, jahil? Isn't this jahil? It is. So for this reason, even today when you hear the word democracy, we have to understand that democracy is not the right word to use in Islam. A lot of people are like, yes, Islam comes with democracy. No, I'm sorry, I have to explain something. Democracy means the rule of the people. People rule. And that's wrong. Okay, let's say that the people, like there's a ruler, a Muslim ruler, and he's like, listen, I don't know, should we ban khamir? Or should we get rid of hijab? And so he's like, well, we have to do something called the democracy. Let's vote. What the majority says, that's what we're going to do. No, inshallah, 99% of the people voted that we want khamir. You can't have khamir. Inshallah, 99.99% of women said we don't want hijab. That does not justify that you don't have to wear hijab. We don't take the rule of people. We take the rule of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we don't want to use the word democracy because it's not always we take the votes of people. If there's something that Allah legislated, here we cannot take the votes of people. But if there is something that Allah left to the people and to the ruler, okay, here you can do something called consultation or shura and take the majority vote. But as long as it does not contradict with the teachings of what? Islam. Today, the people who left the teachings and the legislations of the Islamic Sharia, today the people that think that people can rule and not Allah's rules are what rule. This is another form of what? Jahilliyyah. Okay, and it's a Jahilliyyah that we're living. And here I want to ask a question. Allah is asking that question. He's saying, وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ مِنَ اللَّهِ حُكْمًا لِقَوْمٍ يُوقِنُونَ. Who could be a better judge than Allah for people of sure faith? Who? Who knows more? Who created us? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So those people that think that the teachings or the rules or the constitutions that are man-made are better than Allah's teachings, that is a form of ignorance, even if we're living in the year 2025. A third form of ignorance or jahiliyyah is jahiliyyah in morality. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, do not display yourselves as women did in the pre-Islamic ignorance. Subhanallah, tabarruj, the display of beauty in Islam. You know, one of the things that when I was reading, I just reflected on, and many times I read the ayah, but I never thought of it this way. You know how Allah's telling us as women to not display ourselves as women did, tabarruj al-jahiliyyah al-ula. You know what ula means? Like the people that the first type of jahiliyyah. Ula is from awwal, which means first. So when Allah said there was a first Jahilliyyah in terms of displaying women's beauty, first means there's a what, you guys? There's a second. And that second is the tabarruj, the Jahiliyyah immorality that we're living today. Sisters, if women in the Jahiliyyah, in the years of ignorance, they had certain ways of beautifying themselves and trying to catch the attention of women, what are we to say today? What are we to say today? What are we? The beauty industry today. SubhanAllah. They left nothing. You can change a woman to something else. You can make a 70-year-old woman look like a 20-year-old woman. You can change the color of their skin. You can change the color of their skin also. And here, just please give me like just 5 minutes, sisters, okay? Here, the word tabarruj. I want to tell you guys something so you'll never forget the word tabarruj. First of all, what does tabarruj mean? It means when a woman exposes her adornment, her body features, and all that she is obligated to cover, she exposes it excessively and inappropriately in public. Why? To attract male attention. So she's going against her modesty. She's showing body parts. She's wearing revealing clothing. She's putting on makeup. She's putting like a lot of jewelry on. She's putting on perfume outside the home and in front of people that are non-mahram. Okay? If you guys want to understand what tabarruj is, tabarruj has to do with 3 things. The first thing is showing what you're not supposed to show. And I'm talking about originally. And you guys all know that everything except for your hands and your face, everything other than that, which is apparent. Of course, there is a difference in the opinions of Muslim scholars. Some Muslim scholars said that which is apparent is her face and her hands. Others said that no, all of the woman is a awra. But okay, here we have a difference in opinions. But let's take the general meaning, which is at least everything has to be covered except for your what? Hands and face. If you show anything other than your hands and face, that means you are doing something called tabarruj. That's number 1. Number 2, adding any kind of zina, any kind of adornments, okay? Like putting on makeup, anything that you add zina to yourself that is attracting, this is also called what? Tabarruj. Also, tabarruj is not just how you look. It also has to do with the way you act, like flirting or making your voice like really, really soft in order to attract the sick people. يطمع الذي في قلبه مرض. You know, this is called in Arabic خضوع بالقول. When you make your voice soft, it's a type of flirting with men. And so the men that have weak hearts, they are going to be what? Attracted. Or just walking and stomping your foot and making a sound with high heels. So it's not just actually the way you look, it's also the way you what? Act. It's all called tabarruj. SubhanAllah, I was thinking of the word tabarruj, and in Arabic it has to do with the word burj. Burj. Do you guys know what burj means in Arabic? It means a tower. You guys all know that, SubhanAllah, always Arabic words, even if you add a letter to it, but in the end, they have, there's something between them that connects together. So tabarruj is a woman trying to expose her adornment, her beauty. And it has to do with a fortress or a tower. In Arabic, it's called what? Burj. Why do countries make a burj? Why? And you'll notice that countries are always like in a competition. Which country has a higher tower? It's just to attract the eyes of people, trying to get that fame. And so, SubhanAllah, that's what a lot of Muslim women try to do. And they're trying to beautify themselves to attract the what? To attract the eyes, SubhanAllah. So it reminds me of a buruj or a tower that's very high so that it can attract the eyes of people. SubhanAllah, SubhanAllah. And so we have to understand that we as Muslim women have to pay attention to what we wear, what we do. And we have to understand something that, here I just forgot to say something that, you remember when I told you guys that the word Jahilliyyah, and this third Jahilliyyah, it's directed to women. وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى. And it has to do with the literal meaning of jahl, because we said that jahl means that you're not knowing or you're not thinking. And I feel it in the women. Like many times you're like, before you go out like that, you're not using your brain. You're not. You don't know the ayah that tells you to wear the hijab. SubhanAllah, either they know the ayah, they've got the knowledge, but they just don't want to think. And then the weird thing is many times you'll find women saying, no, that hijab, it's only for the Prophet and his wives, the Prophet's wives. And then I just come to them and I'm like, come on, you don't know Arabic? Oh, you don't need to be eloquent in Arabic to understand the ayah. يا أيها النبي كل أزواجك وبناتك ونساء المؤمنين يدنين عليهن من جلابيبهن. So the ayah is directing the Prophet's wives, his daughters, and nisa al-mu'mineen, which is us, okay, to wear the jilbab. So the jilbab was mentioned in Surah Al-Ahzab, and the khimar, or the covering the head or the hair, is mentioned in Surah Al-what? In Surah An-Nur. So many times, like when you look at women, you're like, you're not thinking. Piercing your nose, going out with, many times today you'll find women saying, oh, there's something called halal nail polish. Come on, you guys, there's no such thing as halal nail polish. There isn't. There's no nail polish in the world that will make the water go through. It doesn't. And if you just want to do a small experiment, like there's this lady, she did on YouTube, she got the nail polish and she put it on a paper towel. Now, if you put water on a paper towel, what happens? It goes through. Put water on the nail polish that you put on the paper towel. It's not going to go through. So you're not thinking, you're not using your brain. You're wearing nail polish all the time and you're forgetting about your salah. Where's your mind? And then you come to women and you're asking them, why do you go out like this? Because she's like, I want to feel beautiful. Why aren't you thinking clearly? Islam wants to teach you something, that what makes a person beautiful is the what? It's the inside. So like stress more on the inside instead of just looking out to the what? To the outside, especially when it comes to non-mahrams. True, it's a nature that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in the woman, but okay, it only goes to mahrams. So many times you look in the beauty industry, whatever comes out, you sisters, you will find women going and doing it. Botox, whether it's healthy or it's not healthy. Tattoos, they do it. SubhanAllah, they will do anything. And many times you'll notice that there are women, they made themselves look ugly. It's not like they're beautifying themselves. They're making themselves look even uglier or worse. So Islam wants to teach you that self-esteem, that you don't get your justification from what other people say about you. You're not a product, okay? So the shaitan is telling you to apply makeup when you go out in front of men, but Allah orders you to beautify yourself only in front of mahrams, and that the real beauty is the beauty of the heart, the beauty of the inside. So who are you going to obey? Think. This is the problem with Jahilliyyah. Women are not thinking. Didn't we say that it's not all about just not knowing? No, they know. Wallah, they know, Muslim women, but they just don't want to think. So use your brain. Why are we having all this Jahilliyyah in terms of what? Immorality. And the last type of Jahilliyyah that's mentioned, sisters, in another surah in the Quran, which is Surah Al-Fath, which is also a Madani surah, it's ayah number 26. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about al-hamiyyah, hamiyyat al-jahiliyyah, which is tribalism. And tribalism means that these people have pride for any kind of nationality, whether it's a tribe, I'm from this tribe, I'm from this family, I'm from this country. And that's what we have today. We have it so much, and so much tribalism, so much, like if you go to one country, like let's say any country you guys want to talk about, okay? Somalia, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, you will find in the same nation, people, they're like tribes and families, okay? If you go to different countries, they're like, oh, you're Palestinian, you're Jordanian, you're Syrian, you're Moroccan, you're Somali. That's called nationalism. And sometimes you've even got racism when it has to do with the color of your skin and so on. So this is a type of what? This is a type of jahiliyyah in here, and it causes division, a lot of division. So you have to think right. I mean, it's okay that we have different ethnic groups, we have different countries, we have different nations. Allah said, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. Allah made us different nations so that we can get to know each other. But when it reaches to the point that we hate each other, okay, and that it's your country, your identity, it's that important to me. No, this is called jahil. And to remind us, and I'm going to like wrap up the class with it and conclude what I want to say, that subhanallah, tribalism and even having nationalities, and especially the Muslim ummah, when they came to our countries, which was one day a vast Ottoman Empire, when they came and they made these imaginary lines that they called borders. Wallahi, sisters, they're imaginary, they're fictional, they're temporary. 100 years ago, we were one Muslim nation, no borders, no nationalities. True, they used to say Bilad al-Hijaz, or they would say Bilad al-Sham, or they would say Al-Maghrib al-Arabi, but that was just to identify that geographical place, not to divide us as Muslims, okay? So today when you notice people like, oh, you're Jordanian, you're Palestinian, these people are better than those, this is also called what? Jahiliyyah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً, right? So true, we might ask each other what country you're from, but that's just like we're asking each other to know, not that it really affects our brotherhood, or we think that anybody's better than the other person because of how they look or their skin color or what country they are from. So that's a big tribalism that we have, a big jahiliyyah that we have today. So to conclude, sisters, what I'm trying to get to is one of the greatest pillars of unpleasant character. One of them, and it's the greatest one, is something called ignorance. It's called jahiliyyah. And many times we associate jahiliyyah with pre-Islamic times, the era that came before the revelation of Islam. What all I'm trying to prove to you guys is that if you go back to the ayahs in the Quran that use the word jahiliyyah, they are 4 ayahs, and they're in the Madani surahs that we mentioned. And these forms of jahiliyyah, I'm sorry to say this, whether it's jahiliyyah in belief, how many people today have superstition? Isn't that jahiliyyah in belief? Or jahiliyyah in law, where we have people that are secularists and they're not taking the laws of Islam, they're not taking the laws of the halal and the haram. That's another type of jahiliyyah. Or whether it's a jahiliyyah in terms of morality, tabarruj al-jahiliyyah al-ula. I mean, if the women at the time of the Prophet in that jahiliyyah, they had ways of going out to attract men, that was the jahiliyyah al-ula. You should come and see the jahiliyyah thaniya today, which is way worse, and look into the beauty industry today. And they are like towers, like a tower tries to attract the attention of people. Also, women today, they are like in a competition. Who looks at me more? Who whistles at me more? Isn't this a jahiliyyah that we're living today, sisters? And the final jahiliyyah is jahiliyyah in tribalism. People that are different nations competing, thinking that they are better or superior to other people, despite the, whether it has to do with their race or their country. I want to remind you guys that these lines, they're imaginary, they're fictional, they're temporary. Great Britain, France, and Italy, they're the ones who drew these fake lines. So these lines, okay, we could have different nations, but it's not supposed to affect our brotherhood, subhanAllah. So we have to be aware of jahiliyyah and try not to follow into it, because that is one of the greatest unpleasant factors in the characteristics of any Muslim today, and not just a Muslim, even a non-Muslim. So subhanAllah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from al-alimeen, to make us from the people that have no jahl in any way, whether it's jahl of not having the knowledge or not using our brain and thinking rationally. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.